Okay, let's unpack this. Have you ever felt like someone was giving you advice, but their own stakes in the outcome were completely different from yours? Or maybe wondered why certain rules seem to stick, while others just vanish without a trace, leaving, well, chaos in their wake? Today we're diving deep into a concept that really cuts through the noise of daily life and helps us see the world with startling new clarity. Skin of the game.
Precisely. Yeah, we're going to explore how having a personal exposure to the consequences of your actions, both the triumphs and the failures, fundamentally shapes fairness, responsibility, and even our understanding of reality itself.
Right.
This isn't merely about incentives. It's about a core asymmetry that touches everything from, say, ancient legal codes to modern financial markets, from our deeply personal choices to global politics and even our spiritual beliefs.
Our mission today is to uncover these often hidden asymmetries that really permeate our lives. We'll draw from a powerful framework that helps us distinguish between true expertise and mere talk, between sustainable systems and those, well, destined to blow up spectacularly.
Yeah, those fragile systems.
You'll discover why some things survive and thrive across generations, becoming robust and timeless, while others are mere flashes in the pan, quickly forgotten. Get ready for some genuine aha moments that will change how you view decisions, trust, and even what it means to be truly rational in a complex world.
Absolutely. It's quite a journey.
So let's start at the very beginning then. When we talk about skin in the game, or SITG, we're not just discussing having a piece of the pie when things go well. It's far more fundamental than that, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely.
It's about bearing a share of the harm, facing a penalty, personal loss, or even, reputational damage if things go wrong. It's that raw, tangible connection to reality where your decisions have real-world consequences you personally experience. It's about being accountable for the downsides, not just reaping the rewards.
Exactly, you've nailed it. This concept, it serves as a kind of unifying principle for seemingly disparate ideas: incentives, ethics, risk management, and accountability. It highlights a simple truth. If you stand to gain from an action, you must also be exposed to the potential losses.
Right. Symmetry.
Symmetry, precisely. This principle underpins not just commercial efficiency, but also fairness and a robust understanding of how the world truly operates. Without it, you inevitably get distortions in knowledge and responsibility and ultimately in outcomes. This framework, it really delves into four critical interconnected areas. First, uncertainty and the reliability of knowledge, what we might call bullshit detection.
Okay, I'll use.
Definitely. Second, symmetry in human affairs, encompassing fairness, justice, responsibility, and reciprocity. Third, the dynamics of information sharing and transactions. And finally, rationality within complex systems and the real world. The presence or absence of skin in the game is the thread that ties all these together, shaping what we perceive as real, ethical, and effective.
To really grasp this, we can turn to a powerful ancient analogy, the Greek myth of Antaeus. He was this giant wrestler, right? Invincible as long as he kept one foot on the ground, drawing his strength from his mother, Earth.
Yes, exactly.
Hercules could only defeat him by lifting him off the ground, severing that vital connection.
It's a perfect metaphor. Just like Antaeus, true knowledge and genuine expertise cannot be separated from contact with the ground, from real-world exposure and its tangible consequences. We learn through pathmata mathemata, a profound Greek concept meaning guiding your learning through pain or direct experience.
Learning through pain or direct experience. That rings true.
It does, doesn't it? Think about it. Most significant discoveries weren't born in a lecture hall or through abstract theorizing. They came from tinkering, from trial and error, from direct engagement with the messy reality of the world. Academia often comes in later to formalize these discoveries, not the other way around.
Right. They describe it after it's already happened.
Precisely. Now, what happens when decision makers are lifted off the ground, like Antaeus by Hercules? We see it repeatedly. The absence of skin in the game in, say, foreign policy decisions can lead to catastrophic failures precisely because decision makers are insulated from the direct consequences.
Like the regime change examples.
Exactly. Take the regime change efforts in Iraq and Libya. These interventions, pushed by individuals with absolutely no personal stake in the chaos and suffering that followed, the results were horrific. Things like the emergence of slave markets in Libya.
Slave markets. Unbelievable.
It's tragic. The decision makers were literally ungrounded, detached from the very earth they were trying to reshape, leading to consequences they never had to face personally.
That makes so much sense. It really does sound like the ultimate filter. But for someone grappling with this in their daily life, how can they practically apply this bullshit detection. What are the telltale signs they should look for when someone is speaking without skin in the game?
That's a crucial question. The telltale signs are often, well, abstract language, a focus on theory over practice, and a comfortable distance from the actual implementation or consequences of their ideas.
Okay, so lots of jargon, maybe.
Sometimes, yeah. Or just speaking in broad generalities without getting into the messy details. It's how you differentiate between theory and practice, between cosmetic expertise and true understanding. As the old saying, slightly modified, goes.
Oh.
In academia, there is no difference between academia and the real world. In the real world, there is.
Right.
When someone pontificates on a topic they have absolutely no personal stake in without ever having done it themselves or faced any downside, their pronouncements are often just, well, noise. As SITG helps us filter out that noise, showing us who actually knows what they're talking about because they've done it.
Because they felt the consequences.
Exactly. They've got that connection. It's a powerful lens. And it's not just individuals who gain clarity through this filter. Entire systems operate and learn under the same brutal yet effective logic. Maybe we should explore how systems themselves evolve by eliminating what doesn't work.
Yeah, let's do that. So systems, too, learn this way. They get smarter by removing errors and bad actors, not necessarily because individual decision makers learn from their own mistakes. Is that right?
Exactly. Systems, particularly robust ones, learn via negativa by the removal of parts that don't work, rather than by adding perfect components. As the saying goes, many bad pilots are at the bottom of the Atlantic.
Grim, but it makes the point.
It does. Their individual mistakes are tragic, of course, but the system of aviation becomes safer as a result of their removal, not necessarily because each surviving pilot individually learned from that specific crash. Skin in the game acts as this crucial filter, keeping human hubris in check and driving evolutionary progress in everything from markets to engineering.
And without it,
you get profound effects, both ethical and epistemological. Ethically, it leads to unfairness and injustice, as the costs of mistakes are shifted onto others who had no say.
Right.
And epistemologically, it prevents genuine learning. It distorts knowledge and allows for intellectual monoculture to thrive because there's no real-world feedback mechanism to weed out the bad ideas.
So people just keep repeating the same mistakes.
Exactly. Those comfortably detached from the consequences of their actions are precisely the ones most prone to delusions and an overestimation of their own understanding. Often using grand terms like democracy while promoting policies that lead to headcutters gaining power. They lack the abrasions of the real world that guide true learning.
This idea of symmetrical accountability isn't new at all then. In fact, it's ancient. You mentioned Hammurabi's code earlier, nearly 4 millennia ago in Babylon. That wasn't just a list of rules. It was a sophisticated system designed to establish symmetries, right? To stop people transferring hidden risks, what some have famously called a Bob Rubin trade, even back then.
You've hit on a core truth. Hammurabi's code was incredibly insightful. The most famous example, which is quite stark, is this. If a builder builds a house and the house collapses and causes the death of the owner of the house, the builder shall be put to death.
Wow, that's direct.
It's direct. Now, this isn't necessarily about literal death for every single mistake, of course. It was a severe, proportionate penalty for severe consequences. The eye for an eye principle, or lex talionis, a legal concept meaning retaliation in kind, was often more metaphorical than literal in its common application. It was a system for imposing sufficient penalties to protect citizens, usually through legal systems rather than crude, direct retaliation.
So it forced the builder to care as much as the owner.
Precisely. The underlying principle ensures that the person inflicting the risk shares a comparable fate to the victim of the risk. I once lectured French financiers at the Louvre, actually just a few hundred feet from Hammurabi's basalt still, where this code is inscribed.
Oh, really?
Yeah. I mentioned this ancient code and its direct connection to the accountability of bankers, contrasting it with modern financial practices. And to my surprise, despite their cultural sophistication, few in the room fully grasped the significance of Hammurabi's foresight in preventing risk transfer. It just highlights how diverse modern institutions can sometimes be from these timeless principles of justice and shared consequence.
Fascinating. So it was about protecting the public from powerful individuals or institutions by ensuring those institutions had skin in the game. That leads us beautifully to a distinction we often overlook. The golden rule versus the silver rule. We all know the golden rule. Treat others the way you would like them to treat you. Sounds nice, right?
Mm-hmm.
But there's a more robust and arguably less intrusive version.
Yes, the silver rule. Do not treat others the way you would not like them to treat you. This rule is profoundly more robust for a critical reason. It tells you to mind your own business, essentially, and respects our inherent human limitations, particularly our limited knowledge.
Also,
Well, we often know with far more clarity what is bad, what causes harm, than what is reliably good for everyone else. Imposing our idea of good can backfire spectacularly. So the silver rule is a via negativa approach, acting by removing harm, which is generally less error-prone and less susceptible to unintended consequences than trying to impose what we think is good.
don't inflict harm rather than try to prescribe happiness.
Exactly. For instance, the First Amendment of the U.S. Constitution, guaranteeing freedom of religion and speech, embodies this symmetric principle. You can practice your freedom as long as you allow others to practice theirs. There's an unconditionality to it that prevents forced universalism. This idea of focusing on what not to do is also embedded in that ancient saying, I go to other people's funerals so they come to mine. It's a dynamic rule for symmetrical social relations, ensuring reciprocity without explicit, potentially intrusive instructions on how to live your life.
So, the silver rule embraces our human limitations, which brings us to the limits of universalism. Grand, sweeping philosophical theories, like some aspects of Kantian universalism, sound great on paper, but often fail spectacularly in practice, don't they?
Indeed. Kantian universalism, the idea that a universal behavior is universally good, or that rules should apply equally to all people at all scales, often collapses because humans are inherently local, practical, and sensitive to scale. As the saying goes, the small is not the large, the tangible is not the abstract.
Right, you can't just scale things up infinitely.
Exactly. When you go to the very general, you lose the practical wisdom of immediate interactions. And abstract ideals, paradoxically, often attract self-righteous individuals, much like the interventionistas we discussed, who seek to impose their grand visions without local context or personal consequence. They treat people as categories, not as individuals with unique circumstances.
That makes sense.
This is where the pragmatic, localized approach of someone like, say, Fat Tony comes in. Start by being nice to every person you meet. But if someone tries to exercise power over you, exercise power over him. This highlights the importance of symmetrical, localized relationships, focusing on concrete interactions rather than abstract mandates.
Tit for tat, almost.
In a way, yes, it reflects real-world dynamics. We also see this in what's been called thick blood versus thin blood ethics. We apply ethical rules, but there's a limit from scaling beyond which these rules cease to apply. A country is not a large city, and a city is not a large family. So the idea that one can be both perfectly ethical and a universalist is sadly not practical in its purest form.
It doesn't scale.
It doesn't scale well. The Swiss approach to governance, starting with the municipality and working upwards, is a testament to the power of scaling and local responsibility rather than imposing top-down, abstract universalisms. Elinor Ostrom's work on the tragedy of the commons also shows that collective properties can be managed effectively when people are treated by others the way they treat them, exercising the silver rule within a defined community.
So local context matters hugely.
Hugely. And the ancient Greek concept of synkendinio, meaning taking risks together in maritime transactions, demonstrates how early societies recognized the necessity of shared risk in collective endeavors, ensuring everyone was literally in the same boat with collective skin in the game. This local, practical, and reciprocal approach is critical for resilient systems.
So ancient wisdom clearly understood the power of shared risk of everyone truly being in the same boat. But what happens when we remove people from that boat? What are the dangers when key players have no personal stake in the outcome? That's precisely what we see with the interventionistas and the insidious nature of bureaucracy. The regime change fallacy is a central example. People who push for these grand, sweeping changes in faraway lands without ever experiencing the blowback are playing a dangerous game. It's an ethical and epistemological void.
Exactly. These interventionistas suffer from three critical flaws in their thinking, leading to systemic failures. First, they think in statics, not dynamics. They see isolated snapshots, not the evolving, interacting system. They make decisions based on a moment, ignoring the cascading consequences over time.
Like taking a photo instead of watching the movie.
Perfect analogy. Second, they think in low, not high, dimensions, reducing complex problems like national stability or public health to a single measurable metric like a dictator's removal or cholesterol levels, ignoring the vast, intricate web of other factors.
Oversimplification.
Gross oversimplification. And third, they think only in terms of actions, never interactions, failing to consider the second, third, or nth order consequences of their interventions. They don't learn from their mistakes because they are not the victims of those mistakes.
And insulated.
Completely insulated. They continue their practice from the comfort of their thermally regulated suburban houses, while the innocent in the affected regions pay the price. This profoundly violates the notion of justice from its very Babylonian inception. The core principle should be, first, do no harm, and those who don't take risks should never be involved in making decisions that affect others. This detachment is not merely inefficient, it is profoundly unethical.
That insulation from consequences also brings us to the insidious nature of bureaucracy and what you famously call the Bob Rubin Trade. For our listeners, imagine earning $120 million from a bank, then invoking uncertainty when taxpayers have to bail it out. That's the core of the Bob Rubin Trade. Heads I win, tails I shout black swan.
Precisely. Bureaucracy, by its very nature, is a construction designed to separate individuals from the consequences of their actions. It's a system where responsibilities are diffused and blame is hard to assign. The Bob Rubin Trade refers to instances where individuals, like the former Secretary of the United States Treasury, accumulate massive compensation during good times only to face no penalties or paybacks when their actions lead to systemic failure.
Like Rubin at Citibank before 2008.
Exactly. Robert Rubin collected over $120 million from Citibank in the decade before the 2008 crash. When the bank needed a taxpayer bailout, he invoked uncertainty, often the excuse of the person without skin in the game, a black swan event, but he bore none of the cost. Taxpayers, from Spanish grammar specialists to assistant school teachers, effectively stopped him out, covering his losses.
Heads he wins, tails we lose.
That's the essence of it. This isn't just unethical. It profoundly distorts free markets, as government bailouts remove the essential skin in the game that disciplines risk takers. Decentralization and localized responsibility are the necessary antidote because, as the saying goes, it is easier to macro bullshit than micro bullshit.
Harder to fool people up close.
Much harder. In decentralized systems like hedge funds, where owner-operators invest a significant portion of their net worth, they go down with the ship, unlike many large banks. This is what true accountability looks like, where consequences are direct and unavoidable.
It sounds like a system that actively prevents learning. Because if you don't feel the pain, you don't change.
You've articulated it perfectly. You will never fully convince someone that he is wrong. Only reality can. And reality doesn't care about winning arguments or saving face. Survival is what matters.
Reality bites.
It does. Systems learn by selecting those less prone to mistakes and eliminating others. This is via negativa, learning the removal of what doesn't work. Transportation didn't get safer just because individual pilots learned from their errors. It got safer because bad pilots, those who crashed, were removed from the system, literally ending up at the bottom of the Atlantic.
So the system evolves through failure.
Through the removal of failure. Skin in the game acts as this crucial filter, keeping human hubris in check and driving evolutionary progress. Without it, you get mental derangement among decision makers, people disconnected from the consequences of their abstract pronouncements, often using terms like democracy while promoting dangerous ideologies. It is the real-world feedback loop that separates wisdom from foolishness and enduring systems from fragile ones.
So often we assume democracy means majority rule, but our next insight might just turn that assumption on its head. This is truly fascinating because it suggests a powerful, almost hidden dynamic that a stubborn minority can actually set the tone for everyone.
Yes, the minority rule.
This is what's known as the minority rule. And it tells us that an intransigent minority, often with significant skin in the game, or maybe soul in the game, can dictate the behavior of an entire population, even at minuscule levels of, say, 3 or 4%. What's even crazier is that an optical illusion makes us believe the choices are those of the majority.
You're right, our intuitions are often not calibrated for such complex systems, and this is where the most intolerant wins principle comes into play. It sounds harsh, but it describes a real dynamic. Let's really drill down on the halal meat example for a moment. In the UK, where the practicing Muslim population is only about 3 to 4%, a very high proportion of meat is halal.
Yeah, you mentioned 70% of lamb imports.
Almost 70% of lamb imports from New Zealand are halal. Now, this isn't because the majority prefers it. It's because non-observant people can still consume halal meat without issue, while observant individuals cannot consume non-halal. The minority's strict, non-negotiable preference, when it doesn't preclude the majority, can drive widespread adoption.
So the path of least resistance takes over.
Exactly. The non-observant simply don't care enough to seek out non-halal options, or it's just easier to buy what's available, and thus the easier path becomes the dominant one. The minority has veto power over one option, but not the other.
So the mechanism here is that the minority has a veto power, and the majority, lacking strong counter-preferences, just goes along with it. We see similar dynamics with organic food, don't we?
Absolutely. With organic food, a minority's aversion to perceived risks from pesticides or GMOs can lead to a larger share of organic products in stores. The non-averse majority can still buy organic, so they often do, avoiding any conflict or inconvenience. Large agricultural firms often fail to understand this asymmetric dynamic, believing they only need to win public opinion, when in fact they're in a game where they need near universal acceptance to avoid being vetoed by the intolerant minority.
Interesting. What about other examples? Like cars.
Another simple illustration is the spread of automatic cars. Manual drivers can drive automatics, but the reverse isn't true for everyone. This one-way flexibility can, over time, drive market dominance for automatics, even if a significant number of people still prefer manual transmission.
So that one-way street again.
Exactly. Even fast food chains like McDonald's thrive, not necessarily because they offer a great product, but because they are not vetoed by a small proportion of people in a group. They offer a safe, predictable, low-variance option when other choices might be risky or unacceptable to someone in the group. The key is that the rule of the minority is imposed in a one-way manner.
That's fascinating how a small, inflexible group can reshape broader markets and norms. But the rules governing this aren't universal across all aspects of life, are they? Like the difference between how genes and languages spread.
That's a crucial distinction. Genes largely follow majority rule. Populations mix, dominant genes spread. Languages, however, often follow minority rule. Languages travel, genes less so, especially historically.
How's that work?
Well, for instance, Aramaic, a Semitic language, became dominant in the Levant not through Semitic imperial power, but because the Persians, who spoke an Indo-European language, found an administration in Babylon where scribes only used Aramaic. So Aramaic became the state language for convenience.
So the administrators dictated the language.
Effectively, yes. Centuries later, the Romans, not the Greeks, paradoxically accelerated the spread of Greek in the Eastern Empire because their administrators adopted it as the lingua franca. This distinction is crucial and debunks many racial theories based on language, like dividing people into Aryans and Semites, as genetics often show different patterns of migration and intermingling. Ancient Greeks and Bronze Age Levantines, for example, despite linguistic divergence, share a common Anatolian origin in their genetic makeup.
So language spread doesn't equal genetic spread.
Not necessarily at all. And this minority rule really shows its power in the one-way street of certain religions, creating profound demographic shifts over centuries. Indeed. The spread of Islam in the Near East, where Christianity was deeply entrenched, can be attributed to simple but powerful asymmetries in the rules. Under traditional Islamic law, if a non-Muslim man marries a Muslim woman, he needs to convert to Islam. And if either parent is Muslim, the child will be Muslim.
All right.
Crucially, becoming Muslim is generally irreversible, with apostasy often being a death penalty offense in many historical and even some modern contexts. The famous actor Omar Sharif, born a Christian, converted to Islam to marry and never reverted, even after divorce.
Wow, so it's a ratchet effect.
Exactly. These rules, even with a small rate of interfaith marriages, create powerful, irreversible demographic shifts over centuries. Christianity itself, earlier, spread through its own form of blinding intolerance for pagan gods, demanding exclusive worship. Roman pagans were initially tolerant and syncretic, allowing people to worship many gods. But Christians were not. They insisted on exclusivity. This assertiveness and refusal to compromise their beliefs effectively outstubborned Roman tolerance, eventually leading to its dominance.
So intolerance can be a driver of strut.
In this asymmetric way, yes. The historical narrative often overlooks this, focusing on persecution rather than Christian intransigence and strict adherence to their rules. This shows that the formation of moral values in society is often dictated by the most intolerant person or group precisely because of this asymmetry. Violating legal and moral rules is haram in classical Arabic, a binary asymmetric interdict that governs all human behaviors, leading to black and white rules essential for group cohesion and survival.
All these asymmetries lead us directly to the agency problem.
Hmm.
Who actually benefits and whose interests are truly being served? Take journalism, for instance. It's often filled with people talking one's book. Or worse, just echoing others to maintain a kind of intellectual monoculture.
Yeah, the echo chamber.
I once told a TV roundtable I couldn't comment on Microsoft stock because I didn't own any, nor would I short it. The confusion on their faces was, priceless journalists are expected to always have an opinion, regardless of personal stake.
Your experience perfectly highlights the core issue in journalism, which we can call the skin of others in your game. Journalists are often seen as impartial judges, but unlike ancient figures like Sissamnes, the corrupt Persian judge flayed alive for injustice, there's rarely a direct penalty for bad advice, false predictions, or a misleading narrative.
No skin in the game.
Very little. This absence of skin in the game allows for talking one's book, promoting an opinion they benefit from, or, more commonly, simply imitating other journalists to create a perceived consensus or collective mirage. Their structural defect lies in worrying more about other journalists' opinions or the approval of their immediate peer group than their readers.
So it becomes about pleasing the in-group.
Precisely. Journalism isn't Lindy compatible in its modern, fast-paced form. Information transmitted organically, like word of mouth in ancient marketplaces, is two-way, with immediate feedback and consequences. Modern journalism's interests increasingly diverge from the public's, leading to a systemic problem that often self-corrects only through collapse, rather than gradual incremental improvement. The ethics of disagreement are also often lost. Charlatans frequently attack what a person said rather than what they meant because it's more sensational and doesn't require deep understanding. This creates a feedback loop that rewards superficiality over substance.
We see a similar, though far more dangerous, agency problem with doctors. While medicine is apprenticeship-based and grounded in experience, the system can push them to shift uncertainty onto the patient. What's the mechanism at play there?
It's a very subtle yet powerful mechanism. You must remember that your doctor, despite their authoritative demeanor, operates within a system that can push them to transfer risk from themselves to you and from the present into your future.
How does that work?
Well, to avoid lawsuits and professional liability, doctors may prescribe treatments for even mildly ill patients, for example, statins for mildly elevated cholesterol, even if the long-term risks for that specific patient might outweigh the benefits. The legal risk for the doctor is immediate if they don't prescribe a standard treatment.
The risk of not doing something.
Exactly. Whereas the medical risks for the patient are delayed, hidden, and can play out years later. This is a classic Bob Rubin risk transfer trade. For many people who are mildly ill, the risks of such treatments often outweigh the benefits, but the pharmaceutical companies and the legal system have incentives to push for widespread usage.
So the doctor protects themselves first.
The system incentivizes that, yes. The ideal, though difficult, solution for a patient is to avoid treatment when mildly ill and reserve medicine for truly severe tail events when the benefits clearly and immediately outweigh the risks. This is why the saying, surgeons should not look like surgeons, resonates. The best practitioners often prioritize safety and cautiousness over flashy, high-risk interventions, especially when the patient is not in a dire, life-threatening situation.
This brings us to a fundamental question about how society structures work. Why do employees exist when contractors seem more efficient? Imagine owning an airline and your contracted pilot bails on an Oktoberfest flight for a Saudi sheikh's millions. You're sunk. This highlights why employees exist.
You've hit on a critical point for understanding how to legally own another person, which is sort of the core of employment. Employees are indeed expensive, but they offer crucial dependability. They have significant skin in the game, job security, reputation, predictable schedules, maybe pension plans that deters opportunistic behavior. They signal a certain domestication, a commitment that contractors often lack.
Domestication, like a reliable dog versus a wild wolf.
It's a useful analogy. Someone who has been employed for a while is providing strong evidence of submission, in a way. They've sacrificed a degree of personal freedom, adhered to schedules, and avoided conflict, making them profoundly reliable. Ronald Coase's theory of the firm helps explain this. Within a firm, market forces are lifted because running them constantly, example, constant contract negotiation and risk assessment for every task, costs more than the benefits of internalizing labor.
So it's cheaper to just employ someone.
Cheaper and less risky in many ways. An employee is, therefore, a risk management strategy for the employer, ensuring reliability in complex operations. Ancient Roman families, for instance, often used slaves as treasurers, not because they were inherently more trustworthy, but because they could inflict a much higher punishment on a slave for dishonesty than on a free person, thereby effectively reducing financial risk through an extreme form of skin in the game.
So freedom isn't always what it seems. In fact, companies can effectively own people through a curious form of slave ownership, particularly with expats. It's a kind of gilded cage.
Absolutely. Multinational companies create expat roles with lavish perks like country club memberships, drivers, luxury villas, all the bells and whistles. These employees, far from headquarters and often operating with considerable autonomy, become addicted to this gilded captivity.
They get used to the lifestyle.
Exactly. They become terrified of losing their status by returning home to less glamorous, often less influential roles. This dependence ensures loyalty and submission, making them highly effective, almost like domesticated wolves. The famous tale of the dog and the wolf illustrates this. The wolf, though lean and hungry, treasures its freedom from the collar, while the dog, though well-fed, is enslaved by its comforts and fears the unknown outside its master's protection.
Right. Freedom entails risk.
Real skin in the game. And these expats often trade that freedom for perceived security and luxury. When employers abandon these domesticated individuals like the IBM lifers who lost their jobs after the rise of personal computers, they often cannot bounce back because their specialized skills and their entire identity were valuable only within that specific, now collapsing corporate culture. They have lost their feral instincts for survival.
This also sheds light on the dilemma of whistleblowers, where even having a few money doesn't necessarily protect you from consequences, especially those levied against your family. It's like society implicitly insists its saints remain celibate to remove these personal dilemmas.
That's a profound observation. For truly ethical choices, one often cannot have dilemmas between the particular, your family, your friends, and the general, the broader collective good. Society often implicitly, and sometimes explicitly, penalizes a collective, like a family, for an individual's actions, even if not directly stated in law.
Like the pressure on Ralph Nader's mother.
Exactly. The story of Ralph Nader's mother being harassed by General Motors, or the subtle social and economic pressures on family members, illustrates this. It hits where it hurts most, making the activist or whistleblower feel guilty for harming their own. In the extreme case of suicide bombers, the source even discusses how Hammurabi's code stipulated that if an architect's house collapsed and killed the owner's firstborn son, the architect's firstborn son would be put to death, a stark symmetry. Similarly, traditional gypsy custom might deliver a direct relative of a killer to the victim's family to prevent future feuds. Now, while I personally feel queasy about transferring a crime from an individual to a collective—
Yeah, that's tough.
It is. But the idea of preventing the families of perpetrators from benefiting from terrorist acts, as many terrorist groups reward suicide bombers' families, is arguably an ethically sound way to inject skin in the game where there otherwise is none. It removes the perceived upside and the incentive to inflict harm on others by targeting the reward mechanism.
Now, let's talk about a character who has proliferated in modernity, often due to this lack of skin in the game. The intellectual yet idiot, or IYI. These are the educated Philistines who can fake a conversation about quantum mechanics after reading The New Yorker, but wouldn't be caught deadlifting.
Yes, the IYI. A fascinating and somewhat concerning product of the majority. Found disproportionately in think tanks, media, and certain social science departments, thriving in environments that lack rigorous real-world feedback.
Because they don't have skin in the game.
Exactly. They pathologize others for things they don't understand, using terms like populism for votes that contradict their preferences, and implicitly believing one Ivy League degree, one vote. Their focus is almost entirely on reputation and peer approval over actual results, making their opinions predictable and often detached from reality.
They miss the forest for the trees.
Often, yes. They fail to naturally detect sophistry and frequently over-intellectualize human behavior, mistaking simple, robust heuristics for complex mathematical calculations, much like Richard Dawkins' take on how a baseball player catches a ball. They prefer complicated solutions, often for problems they've created or worsened, when simple, robust, time-tested methods would suffice.
Yeah.
Their detachment from real-world consequences makes them susceptible to collective mirages, prioritizing peer approval over genuine understanding or utility. They essentially live in a simulation machine where their ideas are tested only against other ideas, not against the unforgiving reality of the world.
This idea of time-tested actually leads us to a powerful concept known as the Lindy Effect. Ever heard of a deli in New York that gives its name to a powerful idea? That's Lindy's, famous for its cheesecake, well, maybe not the cheesecake itself, but the Lindy Effect.
Yes, the Lindy Effect. A wonderful heuristic. It originated from observing Broadway shows, noticing that shows that had been running for a while seemed likely to keep running even longer. It was later formalized by myself and mathematician Ido Eleazar. It states that for non-perishable items, things like ideas, books, technologies, or institutions, their life expectancy lengthens with time, conditional on their continued survival.
So the longer it's been around, the longer it's likely to stick around.
Precisely. That which is Lindy ages in reverse. A book that has been in print for 100 years is likely to stay in print for another 100, if not more, because its survival has already proven its robustness against the filtering mechanism of time. It's a powerful heuristic for distinguishing what is robust and anti-fragile, what loves disorder and shocks, from what is fragile and destined to be destroyed by them. The theory of fragility directly leads to the Lindy effect. It's a natural evolutionary filter.
So true success isn't necessarily about peer assessment, Nobels, or academic honors, is it? It's about enduring the test of time. As a writer, my true judge isn't today's readers or literary critics, but tomorrow's and the day after. Time filters out the fads.
Exactly. Well said. A free person is someone whose fate is not centrally or directly dependent on peer assessment. Prestigious publications, often based on peer review, are frequently not Lindy compatible. They reflect current power structures, fashionable ideas, and academic consensus, not necessarily enduring knowledge.
The flavor of the month.
Precisely. Academia, when unchecked by skin in the game, can devolve into a ritualistic, self-referential publishing game where, ironically, anything that smacks of competition destroys knowledge because it incentivizes novelty over substance and conformity over genuine discovery. Science itself, as Karl Popper highlighted with his concept of falsification, works not because of a perfect scientific method, but because ideas are Lindy-prone. They are subjected to the falsification of time. What isn't useful, what isn't robust, won't survive.
So time is the ultimate peer reviewer.
In essence, yes. It is critical that ideas, just like people, have skin in the game to be truly scientific and valuable. What has survived the test of time is robust, not because of proof, but because it has resisted falsification through generations. Our understanding of human nature, for instance, benefits greatly from the classics, as they are Lindy-proof guides to enduring truths.
Let's turn our attention to inequality and wealth, as these are often viewed through a distorted lens, particularly by the intellectual yet idiot class. Traditional views of inequality, like those put forth by Piketty, are often flawed. Because they're static, they don't account for mobility. Is that right?
You've hit on a crucial point about inequality and skin in the game. Yes, dynamic or ergodic inequality considers the entire future and past life of an individual. Think of it like this. Static inequality is like looking at a single photo finish of a race. Dynamic inequality is watching the whole race, seeing who moves up, who falls back.
Okay.
To make sure I'm explaining this clearly, think of it like a game of musical chairs for wealth. If the same people always grab the top chairs, it's not truly fair or dynamic. True equality in this view isn't just about how many chairs there are, but about ensuring everyone has a real chance to sit in the top ones, and crucially, that those at the top can also fall out.
So churn at the top is important.
Very important. You don't create true equality just by raising the bottom, but by making the rich rotate, by forcing them to incur the possibility of exiting the top 1%. This no-absorbing barrier condition means someone who is rich should never be certain to stay rich indefinitely. Piketty's work, for instance, makes aggressive claims about rising inequality, but uses static measures and mathematical methods that are deeply flawed for understanding dynamic processes where wealth creation often involves small probability bets and winner-take-all effects.
So the math itself is questionable.
Highly questionable for drawing the conclusions he did about long-term dynamics. And where the state is large and protects its elites, top individuals tend to have less downward mobility, creating a stagnant form of inequality. The problem wasn't just his flawed theory, but how the Mandarin class of intellectuals prematurely praised it, often out of a focus on reputation and a lack of true understanding of probability and combinatorics.
So the average person often has a very different take on wealth than what the media or intellectuals assume. You mentioned blue-collar Americans often resent high-paid professionals, but not necessarily the truly rich, especially if their wealth comes from building something tangible or taking real risks.
That's right. The public often despises salarymen who make a lot of money, particularly through rent-seeking or regulatory capture, where income is derived without adding genuine economic activity or taking personal risk. This wealth is perceived as zero-sum. What Peter gets is extracted from Paul.
Taking a slice of the pie, not growing it.
Exactly. But wealth generated through genuine risk-taking and destruction like entrepreneurship in the U.S., where new industries are created and old ones displaced, is often seen as positive sum, benefiting everyone through innovation and job creation. The public's envy doesn't travel long distance or across many social classes to the truly self-made rich. It's focused on those perceived to be gaming the system or extracting value without contributing. Ironically, it is often the clerical class, the university professors, and those with stable, tenured incomes who obsess over inequality and counterfactually upward. They live in an intellectual monoculture, detached from direct interaction with the working class, and thus feel entitled to deal with the poor as an abstract construct they've created, failing to understand the nuances of wealth perception.
And this detachment brings us to a really curious idea. How the rich themselves can be poisoned by constructed preferences, losing touch with their genuine desires. I've been to Michelin-starred restaurants where the food is an entrance exam, the bread isn't warm, and I leave starving. Yet people pay exorbitant prices. This is venenum in oro bibitur. Poison is drunk in golden cups.
It's a profound observation that only the rich are truly poisoned in this manner. When people get rich, especially without a strong internal compass or continued skin in the game, they can lose control of their preferences, substituting genuine desires with constructed preferences dictated by those who want to sell them things.
Like financial consultants, lifestyle gurus.
Exactly. Financial consultants, diet advisors, lifestyle engineers, all often profiting without skin in the game themselves. This sophistication can paradoxically degrade well-being, creating a form of negative utility. Many societies, beyond a certain wealth point, experience this degradation, driven by those who profit from unnecessary complications and the illusion of refined taste.
Like preferring expensive filet mignon over a tastier hamburger.
Precisely. Hamburgers are often inherently tastier due to fat content, but people are convinced the latter is better because it's more expensive and prestigious. Similarly, large, empty mansions, those symbols of wealth, can have a funereal feel on a Sunday evening, unlike the bustling, human warmth-filled grand homes of the past that teemed with staff and family. Many truly prosperous individuals, aware of this trap, continue living modestly, avoiding the mental burden of such constructed preferences.
So wealth doesn't always buy better choices.
If wealth is giving you fewer options instead of more, because you feel obligated to choose the sophisticated option, and the wealthy become targets for those who complicate their lives, then this impoverishment of choice can be detrimental to well-being. It is a subtle but potent form of enslavement to perceived status and others' definitions of success.
This exploration of authenticity leads us naturally to virtue and honor. Having soul in the game isn't about chasing material rewards. It's about existential commitment and a willingness to take risks, even when it's inconvenient or costly. This is where facta non verba deeds before words truly comes to life.
You've articulated it perfectly. Honor implies categorical actions regardless of material rewards, a refusal to compromise one's integrity for any price, and unconditional actions regardless of consequences, much like the ancient duels where people faced death to save face, or Spartan mothers sending their sons to battle with, "Come back with your shield," or "On it."
No compromise.
No compromise. Artisans, for instance, truly have soul in the game. They pursue their craft for existential reasons first, financial ones second. They combine art and business, and they have sacred taboos, things they would never do, like selling something of compromised quality because it hurts their pride and their integrity. As the saying goes, the villainous takes the short road, virtue the longer one.
Like your example of learning Akkadian.
My own efforts to learn Akkadian to read Hammurabi's code directly, rather than relying on potentially flawed translations, felt like an act of soul in the game, essential for intellectual honesty and true understanding. Historically, citizenship required skin in the game, such as paying taxes or military service, not just seeking optional benefits of a passport. Heroes were people of deeds and risk-taking, not library reps or career academics. We can't forget the story of the corrupt Persian judge Sasamnes, flayed alive for injustice, and his son made to sit on his flayed skin as a perpetual reminder that justice requires skin in the game, not just eloquent pronouncements.
That's a powerful visual. But in our modern world, we often see virtue signaling that is anything but true virtue. It's often for show, isn't it? Like the merchandising of virtue.
Absolutely. Virtue is not something you advertise. It's something you enact, often quietly, without fanfare. If your private life conflicts with your intellectual opinion, it cancels your intellectual ideas, not your private life. That's a tough standard, but it speaks to authenticity.
Deeds, not words again.
Exactly. Public displays of virtue, charity dinners, marathons for causes, or putting names on buildings are often a form of simony, historically buying a spot in paradise through earthly donations, but in modern terms, buying social status or a good public image. It's often not true virtue.
Like that Munger quote.
Yes, the investor Charlie Munger's question. Would you rather be the world's greatest lover, but have everyone think you're the world's worst lover? Or would you rather be the world's worst lover, but have everyone think you're the world's greatest lover? Highlights the ancient Roman ideal of esse quam videri, to be rather than to seem. True virtue is doing something for the collective, especially when it conflicts with narrow self-interest, or being kind to the neglected, the less obvious cases that large charities often miss.
What about unpopular virtue?
The highest form of virtue is often unpopular. Taking uncomfortable positions that risk your reputation for truth or justice, not engaging in mob shaming or echoing popular sentiment. When young people ask me how to help mankind, I tell them, never engage in virtue signaling, never engage in rent-seeking, you must start a business. Take bounded risks, generate real economic activity, and provide value. That is true courage and contributes far more to collective well-being than empty gestures. This is the path to peace. Neither ink nor blood, meaning meaningful contributions, not just words or destructive conflicts.
And finally, this lens also offers a unique perspective on religion and belief, something you call no worship without skin in the game. You argue that theologians don't know what they're talking about when they talk about religion, when they ignore this core principle.
Well, theologically, belief cannot be a free option, as Pascal's wager seems to suggest, where you just bet on God's existence without personal cost or sacrifice. There must be symmetry between what you pay and what you receive. The gods do not like cheap signaling.
Sacrifice is key.
Sacrifice seems essential. My visit to the Aramaic-speaking town of Malula, where the church altar had a drain for blood, a relic from pre-Christian pagan sacrifice, vividly illustrates this. Ancient pagan worship involved physical, visible proof of commitment and suffering literal skin in the game.
Wow. Blood drains.
Yes. The Christian insistence on Jesus' human side means he truly suffered and sacrificed himself on the cross. A God without skin in the game in this manner, who didn't really bleed and suffer alongside humanity, would be like a magician performing an illusion, not someone who actually endured peril and shared our human condition. Love without sacrifice is theft.
Powerful stuff. What about the "is the Pope atheist" question?
This perspective also reframes the provocative question, is the Pope atheist? This isn't meant to be literal, of course. It highlights that in critical medical or ethical situations, most religious people, including popes, act indistinguishably from atheists, relying on modern medicine rather than solely on miraculous intervention.
Their actions betray a reliance on the non-miraculous.
In those critical moments, yes. This suggests that religion often functions to manage tail risk across generations and enforce binary, unconditional rules for group survival, not necessarily through purely rational scientific beliefs. Survival comes first, truth, understanding, and science later. We cannot truly judge beliefs as irrational if they contribute to evolutionary survival, such as the constructive paranoia of Papua New Guinea residents who don't sleep under dead trees, a superstition that is deeply rational for their survival, regardless of scientific explanation.
We've covered a lot of ground, and to tie it all together, let's look at risk and rationality. And there's a concept here that will rewire your brain if you're not a risk taker. The profound difference between the probabilities of a large group and a single individual over time. This is how to be rational about rationality.
This is absolutely critical. It's the distinction between ensemble probability and time probability, a profound insight often missed in traditional risk models and even decision theory for centuries.
Okay, break that down for us.
Consider a casino. If 100 people gamble once, statistically, maybe 1% might go bust. That's an ensemble probability looking at a group at one point in time. But if one person, let's call him your cousin Theodorus, gambles 100 days in a row, he has a 100% probability of eventually going bust because he will inevitably hit an absorbing barrier or uncle point irreversible ruin. That's time probability looking at one person over time.
So the individual's path matters hugely.
Critically, traditional finance models often conflate these, giving flawed advice for individual investors by ignoring the path dependency and the risk of irreversible ruin. My own rule, never cross a river if it is on average 4 feet deep, comes from this. Average depth means nothing if one spot is 10 feet deep and you can't swim. That one deep spot is the absorbing barrier.
Ruin is ruin.
Exactly. This fundamental flaw in decision theory, missed for over 250 years by many economists, but intuitively understood by practitioners and some physicists like Ola Peters and Murray Gell-Mann, proves that in order to succeed, you must first survive. Your personal time series is your skin in the game, and ruin is always a possibility for the individual.
So rationality isn't about believing the right things, but about acting in a way that ensures survival and avoids ruin. It's about the logic of risk-taking.
Exactly. Rationality isn't about the rationality of a belief in an abstract philosophical sense, but the rationality of an action in terms of evolutionary survival. If a superstition, like not sleeping under dead trees in Papua New Guinea, helps you avoid ruin, it is profoundly rational, regardless of scientific explanation.
Survival trumps correctness.
In an evolutionary sense, yes. Courage and prudence are not contradictory in this framework. They are two sides of the same coin. Courage means sacrificing your personal well-being for the survival of a higher layer, your family, your collective, your ideals. This is a form of prudence that prioritizes systemic survival over individual comfort. Selfish courage, acting only for personal glory without regard for the collective, is not true courage.
Interesting.
And there are a zillion ways to make money and live well without taking tail risk, the kind of extreme, low-probability, high-impact risk that can lead to total ruin. Truly successful people like Warren Buffett establish high filters and say no to almost everything that poses such systemic risks, understanding that avoiding ruin is the ultimate form of long-term success.
This also helps us understand why some common statistical comparisons are incredibly misleading, like saying Ebola kills fewer people than bathtub drowning, or more people were killed by furniture than terrorism. Your grandmother would tell you this is nonsense.
And your grandmother would be absolutely right. This is a classic example of naive empiricism. Never compare a multiplicative, systemic, and fat-tailed risk from extremistan, where outliers have extreme impact, to a non-multiplicative, idiosyncratic, and thin-tailed one from mediocristan, where outliers are negligible.
Okay, unpack multiplicative versus idiosyncratic.
Bathtub drownings or furniture accidents are idiosyncratic. They affect individuals without correlation to the collective, and one drowning doesn't make another more likely. They don't scale up systemically. Terrorism or pandemics are multiplicative. They have systemic effects that can affect many people simultaneously and can spread rapidly. One case can lead to many more.
So the potential for scaling is the key difference.
Exactly. There's a non-zero, albeit small, probability of a pandemic killing billions, but zero probability of a billion people drowning in bathtubs simultaneously. Systemic effects are what matter for collective survival. Journalists and social scientists, often trained with tools for mediocristan, frequently fall prey to this fallacy, presenting isolated data points as if they represent equivalent risks.
It's comparing apples and, well, potential global catastrophes.
Precisely. Ultimately, rationality at its core is the avoidance of systemic ruin, not merely the avoidance of the most common everyday hazards. It's about recognizing and respecting the difference between risks that can scale and spread and those that cannot.
What a deep dive into the world of skin in the game. We've journeyed from ancient laws to modern markets, from personal integrity to collective survival, all through the lens of accountability and consequence. We've really seen how this fundamental concept reorients our understanding of fairness, virtue, and even what it means to be truly rational.
We've unveiled how hidden asymmetries govern so much of what we consider fair, true, and even rational. The presence of skin in the game is not merely an incentive, it's a filter for reality, a powerful driver of learning, and a fundamental pillar for robust systems that can withstand the test of time and chaos. It encourages us to distinguish between those who merely talk and those who truly act.
So the next time you encounter a piece of advice, a political statement, a news headline, or even your own internal deliberations, ask yourself, who has skin in their game? You'll be surprised at how much clearer the world becomes and how much more discerning you become about where to place your trust.
And remember, true virtue is not something you advertise on a billboard or through public displays. It's something you enact, often quietly, sometimes at significant personal risk, for the benefit of a greater collective. It's in the deeds, the sacrifices, the tangible actions, not just in the words or the intention.
We leave you with this provocative thought. In a world inundated with information and opinion, where true accountability often feels scarce, what actions are you willing to take that truly put your skin in the game?